Socially acceptable, mask off, frighten everyone. What? Great, good afternoon to everyone. Those of you that were over in our North County court today saw something of an unprecedented nature. A major United States corporation pleading guilty to 85 felony counts, 84 of which were homicide counts, which killing 84 Butte County citizens. This was a historic moment, and hopefully historic moment for corporate America to know that prosecutors wherever will not allow them to get away with recklessly endangering the lives of the citizens that they serve. The campfire destroyed approximately 18,804 structures on November 8th of 2018. Of those 18,000 structures, there were 13,696 single-family residences that were destroyed. 462 of those residences were damaged. There were multiple family residents destroyed and also damaged. There was commercial, about 528 businesses that were destroyed, another 102 commercial structures that were damaged. But that doesn't really tell us the full extent of the damage, because the loss in life is what made this 153,000 acre fire even more devastating. Some 84 lives were lost. We'll, at this point, go to a short video that kind of encapsulates what we have involved in the campfire and some of the major findings of our investigation. This is where the suspect tower was, called 272 high tension tower. This should not be here. This is taken 3 days after the fire started. just to point out, because you have to get kind of used to some of the terminology that we're talking about. Insulators, you see here in green, these are attached with a hook to these transposition arms that come out from the tower. They are, this is the hook. Here's one of the insulators, and it's usually a string of insulators that comes down that has the line, or what we call a conductor, underneath. It's 115,000 volts of electricity that is running through that line, so we don't want that be getting near the steel structure. The jumper, that we call this, just for your information, call it a transposition tower, because it transposes one line to another in the electrical engineering to take one phase to another phase so that the electricity is flowing through the lines in an equal manner. I won't bore you with the science. It is, however, every once in a while we have one of these towers on the line. These are not towers that are right next to each other, but these are important towers, and they've got a lot more hardware that hang off them, as we'll discuss. Electricity's running through this. Give an example, kind of see what you're seeing there. This is a section of the transpositional arm. This comes out from the tower, and basically the hook that you see here that has the insulators on it hangs from, at first, this hole, which is the original hole that was in the superstructure of the tower. And later on, it became obvious that this hole, as you can see in the variety of holes we have here, was starting to wear and wear down. This was a complete circle, and the 5/16 hook that was supposed to be hanging in that hole was supposed to be very snug. This hook should have hung in this manner, but over the years, as you can see, it started wearing and wearing and wearing. So you have this type of wear, and from the experts that we had, some of these hooks were purchased in 1919, and those hooks, good hooks for their day, but you don't leave them in the tower for nearly 100 years, because what happens is this. When this line came down and arced onto this steel structure, there was between 5,000 to over 10,000 degrees of heat that was generated. It melted the steel structure, it melted the aluminum wire, and threw molten metal down onto the ground that was in a historic drought and was being blown over by 40 to 50 mile an hour winds. It broke, as we can see from hooks that were in other areas that were less in a windy area, but still nonetheless had a lot of wear. To the point that it broke. And that is what killed 84 Buchanan citizens. This fell, sparking a conflagration that eventually destroyed a town, a lifestyle, and lives. Go back, go ahead, Chris. It was important this morning as the PG&E CEO was standing up and giving the 85 guilty, Your Honor, pleas, that we put a face to each of the names that were in the document. The document being the indictment by the Buchanan grand jury, a special grand jury, as indicated in your materials that we've given to you and that are up on right now up on the Buchanan District Attorney website, that showed that those 84 people did not need to die if PG&E had done its job in a reasonable way. November 8th, this starts at around 6:15 in the morning. Just to give a quick little timeline. At 6:15 a.m., the PG&E Central Hub detected a disturbance on their line. At around 6:30, a Caltrans worker going to work up in the Feather River Canyon saw that there appeared to be a fire. At first he thought it was the sun rising. The sun was rising in the canyon about 15 minutes before dawn. You can see the tower that is Tower 27222, where the fire had begun. He took a photo of that. It was called into the Jarbo Gap station. And interestingly enough, Jarbo Gap Station in a place called Jarbo Gap is also, it gives its name to the horrendous winds that come down that canyon during this every fall. And this was no different than any of the other years in which we have winds that go between 30, 50, sometimes up to 70 miles an hour down through that canyon. As the CAL FIRE captain got to the area that was reported to him of being where this fire was, he looked across the river, saw that he and his crew could not get to the fire immediately, and saw that, show his photo, could see that the fire already was exploding and getting bigger by the moment. His rather prophetic understatement to his dispatch center was, uh-oh, this looks like this has the possibility of being a major incident. And it was. Within an hour, it was at the West Branch Canyon of the Feather River, which was on the east side of Paradise, having already gone through Polga and Concal with untold destruction there, and then starting to jump that canyon and throw softball-sized embers into the town to the north, and also to completely over the town into the Butte Creek Canyon. Paradise was then hit from 3 sides by fire and also internally from the embers that were growing. People had very little notice, very little chance of getting out. Go to this is the sites of each of the deaths that occurred, deaths of the most unimaginable horror, being burned to death. The Butte Creek Canyon to Concal, an area that CAL FIRE at one point made an estimate was burning at a rate of a football field a second. It came in so rapid and was spreading embers so rapid that, quite frankly, it was a miracle that anyone got out, much less the some 26,000 people that had to be evacuated from that area. Within hours of the fire, the CAL FIRE arson investigators had gone up to that particular location, had determined that Tower 27/222 was a tower that had that broken arm, broken hook, the line down into the structure, and was obviously the start of the fire as they started to look underneath and found that there was shards of molten metal that had started the fire. They immediately began their investigation, and towards the afternoon were run out of that investigation by the fire turning back on them at another location. But coming back the next day, Friday, contacting my office, indicating that there appeared to be a problem and that they were beginning the investigation. We indicated we would partner with them on this investigation, having had prior run-ins, or rather prior times with PG&E, where we've had criminal cases largely around vegetation management. and largely around the PG&E not clearing vegetation appropriately around their distribution lines, lower level, lower voltage lines. When they had indicated that PG&E had been seen in the area in a helicopter, it was direction of our office that they start to treat this as a crime scene and to lock it off as a crime scene and allow no one in, including PG&E. CAL FIRE was already on the job, already were getting private security to lock off that area. It became clear in their investigation that the idea of the fire came from that broken hook. So I've already shown you this hook had a point to it at one point. We never found the point of this hook. Some folks had asked, well, why not? It was not for lack of trying, but as you've seen in the pictures and do see in the report, the pictures of that area, it is an extraordinary slope that goes down into the Feather River Canyon. It is expected that this point that should have been there that had worn through is somewhere down in the canyon and was lost for all time. As the investigation continued, it became clear that there were worn hooks in other locations. And of particular significance was that the worn hooks that were hanging, many of them were hanging in a bolt-on bracket for another hole, where it had become clear that the original hole for the original tower had worn so badly that sometime in the past, and PG&E had no records of when this occurred, they, noticing, having the information that this was dangerous, really put on another bracket, and in some cases put back the same 1919 hooks. As I told some of the press that are here, these hooks in 1919 were 22 cents a piece. They're now $13 a piece with inflation. But that became also a point of our investigation as to why this wasn't noticed. Why did PG&E leave this hanging in the air when it was fairly obvious that these, if you looked at it, if you went up into the towers, that these were wearing? Someone in the distant past had noticed that, but had not passed the information on. The corporation within itself had a kind of a history of siloing. One person not passing on the information to another, one division not passing on the information to another. One of the interesting facts that we determined during the investigation is as part of this siloing, it involved various different departments. There was a department called the Tower Department. The Tower Department was responsible for the maintenance of the steel structure that you see. But that's all they were responsible for. The Line Department was responsible for the conductor, the line, the power line that ran through those towers, but not responsible for the structure. In between those two were these hooks that became basically orphans. No one was accepting responsibility for the hooks for many, many years. Another point that was discovered during the investigation was that these towers, this line, the Caribou Palermo power line, or transmission line, I should say, was purchased from the original builder and owner, the Great Western Power Company, that ran the line basically from Caribou way up the Feather River Canyon all the way to the Bay Area. PG&E bought that line, as they had many other lines in Northern California, consolidating much of the utility lines in the Northern California area, but never really had a good idea of what was the equipment. Didn't have a full equipment list. Did not know everything that they had bought. One of the analogies that we saw, it was not unlike someone buying a car, a used car, not taking it to a mechanic, not checking how well it's run, and then running it into the ground, not changing the oil, not maintaining it whatsoever. This appeared to be what happened up in that canyon, and not just in that canyon, but many other lines that were in Northern California. Inspections were minimal at best, and over the years they went down and down and down in terms of how many inspections were originally once a year inspections, climbing inspections every couple, 3 years. Got down to the point where since 2005, there had been no climbing inspections in any of these towers to get up close and personal and find out what the wearer was doing. Persons that would be responsible for knowing when they were doing what we call drive-by inspections or fly-by inspections were so poorly trained that they didn't know what they were looking at. One of the matters that we took a look at and somewhat came to our conclusion is that these hooks, as indicated, should have fit very snugly with only a 1/16 of an inch in space. As the wear went on, you can see it's a lot more than a 1/16 of an inch. In talking to a number of the linemen and troublemen, they had indicated that, they didn't really notice this. We found that somewhat difficult to believe until we dug down into their training and their method of inspection that was approved by PG&E's kind of culture, is that they did not know what they were looking at. They had no idea what these hooks were. And so over the years, these hooks wore and wore and wore with no one looking at them until obviously disaster struck. Why was the maintenance being and training being so badly overlooked in the investigation? And it became clear that profit was a driving force. You don't have to spend as much money on maintenance, on capital projects, even if you tell the regulatory agencies that you are going to do that. We saw a number of instances of that. When they get to that project, and they can then justify a rate increase, increasing their profit. The people nonetheless have safety be as a secondary element, if that profit is the main element of trying to get back and reduce maintenance and training. We found a number of records that were, if not outright false, at least very misleading. Things such as other maintenance problems. 6 towers in the area on the Caribou-Palermo had fallen down in 2012. And yet on PG&E's maintenance records were continued to exist as if they still existed. And we found this to be of some interest and concern. It was, however, not only the Caribou-Palermo line, and we did a comparison with other lines that showed that Caribou-Palermo was not necessarily an outlier. And PG&E, with its own vendors, with its own engineering, outside engineering firms in 2010, 2012, found that warnings were given that your towers are way past the time that should be left up. You need to make a massive replacement. Found some emails that indicated certainly a run to failure maintenance policy. When I say run to failure, that means you replace it, which means you've maintained it once it fails. That, in this era of climate change, severe historic droughts, was the precursor of the events that came forward. They would have they being PG&E, it, the company, had a term they talked about: reliability. Reliability to the layperson usually means, okay, well, this would be good. This is reliable power. It's being delivered safely. But to PG&E, reliability as a metric in how they determined their maintenance budgets and capital budgets meant those towers, those power lines that served more people got more attention. The lines that were in the hinterlands, the Feather River Canyon, Pitt River, the other out of sight areas of Northern California got short shrift because of a belief that should the power go off, the reliability was not as high on the point scale because there wasn't many people affected. Power line was getting ready to go down. In the Bay Area, it could mean hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people that were going to be affected. However, up in the Feather River Canyon and other areas of Northern California, only a few thousand were going to be affected. Certainly came to our belief that the rural folks were certainly being sacrificed for, in our opinion, for much of the reliability of power down in the Bay Area, because the power come from what PG&E calls the stairway of power, the various powerhouses up the Feather River Canyon. The idea of the PG&E, as we went through the various elements and went through the examination. We did it with the really fantastic sacrifice and hard work of some 16 ordinary Butte County citizens. When we began our investigation, basically the day after the Camp Fire, when the Butte County District Attorney's Office became involved, we started to reach out, get various paperwork from PG&E, get various data from PG&E, then also started looking for witnesses, both past and present PG&E workers. It became somewhat clear that became very clear that those folks had been contacted by PG&E and encouraged into silence. Under the American system of justice, people don't have to talk to you if they don't want to, except if they are under subpoena. In March, we partnered with the California Attorney General and picked what is known as a investigatory criminal grand jury. It's a special grand jury. It's not your watchdog grand jury. And some 19 ordinary citizens out of 100 that were called to the Chico courthouse, where many of you were then sworn in, and for almost a year to the day, were meeting twice a week with, as they indicated, extraordinary sacrifice, being there each time to listen to some almost 100 witnesses, some 1,600 pieces of evidence, generate something like 6,000 pages of grand jury transcript. To show their dedication, almost unheard of for that long a period of time, the 19 only whittled down to 16, and those 16 people held out till the day that we asked them to review the evidence and come back with an indictment, which they did, which you heard and was unsealed today. And the indictment itself is up on our website for anyone to take a look at. That information that we gave to the grand jury was sufficient to take PG&E's obvious negligence from mere civil level of negligence up to criminal negligence, which is a gross negligence, and a criminal negligence, a reckless negligence. An ordinary person, would not have done what PG&E did. The ordinary, reasonable person, and convinced our grand jury of that information, and they did return that indictment. You can read, and I don't intend to go through all of the elements, but one thing that should be noted, because it certainly is the subject of a lot of angst among our citizens, is the fact that no one within the PG&E Corporation, no individual, was found to be guilty of that negligence. No individual was going to go to jail. And it was not for a lack of trying on our grand jury in looking through all of the evidence. In looking through that evidence and dealing with the California law on what a executive or higher level person has, we would have to have shown that person knew sufficient information and took personal action to have this disaster that occurred and know that this disaster would occur. Many people confuse this idea with this civil, what we call respondent superior. In other words, it's a civil element. Many of us know, okay, the boss, he's responsible for whatever happens down below. That is a civil concept. Read from the case that is the seminal case, the leading case in this area of corporate officer liability. It notices an officer of a corporation is not criminally answerable for any act of a corporation in which he or she is not personally a participant in a context of negligent homicide. Such an officer would be said not to be liable unless he or she was personally aware of the omissions and other behavior that give rise to criminal negligence. The decisions involving criminal liability of corporate officers either expressly or impliedly focus either on the officer's direct participation in the illegal conduct or his or her knowledge and control of the illegal behavior. The mere fact of the officer's position at the apex of a corporate hierarchy does not automatically bestow criminal liability. The decision-making by PG&E's culture was largely by committee. The silo mentality that I talked about made the decisions that led to this disaster were started in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. It would have been virtually impossible to prove a person making a decision in 1995 knew that decision was creating a catastrophic risk of fire over 20 years later and had either ignored or disregarded that risk. But the corporation as an entity is tasked with that knowledge and reckless behavior and was so indicted. It brings us to where we are today, where we saw PG&E through their corporate executive give a plea of guilty, yes, guilty, Your Honor, 85 times. And we expect tomorrow to have the surviving loved ones of those, we could go to the context sheet, of those folks that died in these various areas in the Paradise and Concow area. The loved ones of these people tomorrow will have their say, will have the opportunity to tell the judge what effect that this had on their lives, what effect losing a loved one in this most horrendous of ways has had on their well-being. Now, these are only the direct victims of the death at that time. We know that there had been other victims that over the weeks, the months, in fact, two victims died later, some months later, that we could show a direct causal link to the fire. But we know there must be others that were out there that, as a result of the fire and the upending of their lives, and we've heard from other folks that virtually destroyed their health. And the fact that PG&E destroyed not just these people, but an entire community, an entire town. It killed a town. This is the first time that PG&E or any major utility has been charged with homicide as a result of a reckless fire. And we hope that, as Mr. Johnson today said, it will live on. It will become a new mantra in the PG&E matrix that safety must come first, not a matrix of risk analysis versus profit making, but making sure that going forward, PG&E must do this, or, like these victims, die. With that, I'll ask any of your questions.
District Attorney Ramsey, this clearly was an emotional journey for you as a prosecutor. How has the past year and a half been looking at these images and investigating in very intimate detail what happened and why it happened?
This was an emotional thing for all of our team, and I'm going to just kind of quickly just mention there are 4 of the main team. It was, well, Mr. Knoll, back here, raise your hand, Mark. Okay, Mark Knoll was the lead prosecutor on this. Jennifer Dupre-Tokus raised her hand. We have 2 were lead investigators, that Nick Moore and Mr. Barkley, that Jason Barkley, and plus many other members of our office, that we decided this was important. We did not want the situation that we saw like in San Bruno, in which there was no murder, or rather homicide counts. It was only the counts that they were in the federal court found guilty of was bad record keeping, criminal record keeping, lying on the records. So what we were looking at is saying, no, we're going to put a line in the sand. If we can prove it, if we can use the grand jury to make sure that we can prove this beyond a reasonable doubt, then we're going to do it. We have an office of around 100 people. 10 of our fellow employees were burnt out. I had a daughter. As I was crossed at that morning of November 8th, when I went across the parking lot right behind this building to go to the courthouse on a death penalty case, and I looked up towards the north and east and saw a huge tower of smoke, and had been informed earlier, well, it looks like maybe Concal's being threatened. That looks worse than what I was told, but went to court. As I was doing the case, one of my deputy DAs came over and said, your oldest daughter in Florida needs to talk to you. When I talked, so I called my oldest daughter and said, okay, what's up? And I'd been getting information in that this looked bad, that this was a bad fire. And then got information and started to jump into paradise, where my youngest daughter, her 4 small children, and 5th on the way, were. Oldest daughter says she doesn't want to leave. She thinks she can ride it out, Dad. Use your best dad voice to call her and tell her to get out. I did. Took some convincing, but she barely made it out. She had to go drive through with a van full of those children through a wall of fame. So, sorry. So yeah, emotional, personal to all of us and our friends. More so to those folks. Yes.
District Attorney Mike Ramsey, are you satisfied with the end result?
We're satisfied in the sense that we brought PG&E to the realization that they were guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of criminal negligence. They pled guilty to all that they were charged with. Are we satisfied with the punishment? No. But we're getting the punishment for a corporation that is the maximum in the law that California allows. There's a kind of a duality in California law. We treat corporations like persons, but we don't send corporations to jail. But we fine corporations. That's the punishment for corporations. We fine them the same as we would a person. But there's obviously a disconnect there, because as will be the sentencing coming up in a couple of days, the maximum punishment, financial punishment for a person and therefore a corporation in California is $10,000 per death and $50,000 for the unlawful fire. That's, of course, adds up to $190,000. And then when the court does its various add-on fees, that adds up to about $3.4 million. For a corporation as large as PG&E, is that sufficient? Is it sufficient for any corporation that has done what they did here? In our view, no. And would hope that the legislature would take a look at that and change that fee structure. Can't put a corporation in jail, then make the punishment more for those corporations that do this. So that is what our belief is. But tremendous amount of work by a tremendous amount of people, and received a number of calls from other DA's offices indicating how the heck did Little Butte County bring such a large corporation with huge legal resources, and we fought quite a bit of those legal resources, to the point that they're pleading 85 felony counts, including 84 homicide counts. It's unheard of how to do that. So it's the people here, the people that felt it, the people that needed to see that justice was done. Punishment may not be, but the idea of convicting these people of what they did, what it did.
Could you also discuss in the indictment the 3 special allegations causing this particular bodily injury to firefighters and ongoing risk to firefighters?
Sure. The testimony of firefighter, we had a firefighter that had gone up, was fighting the fire that day. He had an inmate crew with him. This fire was extraordinarily devious, as you may have seen, and people have seen, that sometimes it would swirl through a neighborhood, take out an entire neighborhood and leave one place. It was all over the place with the winds. They were in a field, were getting ready to do a line, to a defensive line, when suddenly the fire blew up to their side. This CAL FIRE captain in charge of this inmate crew got his crews, yelled at them, said, "Get out of here, guys," and held open a barbed wire fence for them, the dozen or so inmate firefighters, to get through that fence and save themselves by going out into the middle of a pasture. After the last person was through, he had to try and get himself through and got hung up. The fire came over him. He was horribly burned. He's had, Jennifer, how many operations?
Tomorrow will be the 3rd.
Tomorrow he'll have the 3rd operation of particular heart-wrenching. He had indicated that he had seen some months later, after many weeks in the hospital, he had seen one of the inmate crew And they said, you know, we want to thank you for saving our lives, in a sense, sacrificing yours so that we could get done. But says, Cap, we will never get out of our mind watching you and hearing you burn. Those are those types of things that kind of drive us forward. The addition, there are other people that had, and as mentioned in the report, other citizens that got horribly burned. The rescuers came to, tried to lift them up, and skin just came off. Those folks were in hospitals for quite a period of time. And so that's where the special allegations for the firefighter and those with multiple great bodily injuries. And then, of course, the multiple structures burned was the approximately 18,804 structures that had been burned as an additional allegation that was proven.
District Attorney, Governor Newsom and his appointees are working to help PG&E, for instance, waiving payment of a $200 million fine to help PG&E exit bankruptcy. And your opinion as the one leading this investigation, should the state be helping PG&E, and do they deserve to keep their monopoly license?
You know, that's above my pay grade, but I can certainly have an opinion on that. This was a point of negotiation, in a sense, between PG&E and ourselves. PG&E did step up to put money aside in the bankruptcy process to take care of those citizens who have lost their property, who have lost their livelihood, who have lost loved ones. And of that 13.5 billion that they've set aside, not just for the Camp Fire, but also for the Sonoma or North County fires, that those folks are deserving of some money. They're deserving of some recompense. And quite frankly, there was a balancing where certainly PG&E was saying, please don't charge us because that will kill the company, and we won't be able to pay out any money, and the people that were so grievously financially hurt will get no money. So that was a balance. But as a prosecutor, we had to kind of keep our true North Star and say, is the evidence sufficient there to show that they were guilty of criminal negligence? And so we continued forward. Of interest, in this particular situation, and as Mr. Johnson today indicated, they are on notice. And when I say they, now I'm talking individuals. Whoever is taking over PG&E, and certainly Governor Newsom insisted that they had a whole new board, a new CAO or CEO. They are on notice that they have to do something, or they very well may face personal liability. The excuses are gone. We have pointed out to them where they have gone wrong, where they have to make a change. Well, in that, going back to kind of that balance, it certainly was a lot of discussion about, oh, please, don't charge us, you'll kill us. Of course, snarky prosecutors would say, maybe you deserve to die, like these people. But we had to continue forward. But an interesting aspect is if they died, it'd be like a person dying, that duality of person and corporation. If the corporation died, it'd be like a person dying. The investigation, prosecution would be over. It's hoped that they survive, barely, that they do the right thing, that they maximize the payment out to the folks. And during this investigation, we saw continually where the amount of money set aside for the fire victims went continually up. Started, I think, at 8 billion and continued up to 13.5 billion. So we're hoping they're doing the right thing. Of course, it can be said, we've heard this before. We certainly heard it in San Bruno, but that was the gas division. There is some indication that in the gas division of PG&E, that is considered now, once they got slapped around pretty good, they are kind of a gold standard right now in terms of doing gas work the right way. It is only a hope that PG&E will become the gold standard on the electrical transmission side of their house. We will see. We will be watching. And when I say we will be watching, as part of this plea, PG&E and 2 items beyond getting the maximum punishment, we are hooked in to Judge Alsep's probation, federal probation, that there's a monitor, and that monitor, kind of like a probation officer in a way, that is watching PG&E, is now will not only report to Judge Alsep, but will report to our office. And in speaking to Judge Alsep, who really is a fabulous jurist, and has really kept PG&E's feet to the fire, we'll have a second set of eyes on PG&E to make sure that they follow through with the promise of being a better reformed corporation. Another one is that they agreed to pay some $15 million over the next 5 years to put water back in a wooden flume that was destroyed in the fire that supplies water to a number of citizens in Butte County. Anybody else?
Just to sort of follow up, you did mention San Bruno. What would you say to somebody who does feel like this is more of the same? Did PG&E get justice for its crimes in this case?
As we indicated, down in San Bruno, there was no homicide counts. Here, there are homicide counts. We're honoring the memory of those 84 people here. It's a modicum of justice. It's not perfect justice, but we don't have a perfect system. Mark?
We were very fortunate with the great work that was done by the San Mateo County investigators. Like Mike said, they didn't have homicide. The reason we did is because we were able to build on the great work that they started. And it's been a long day. He asked about emotion and the contact sheet up there. I've had that on my wall for the last 17 months for every victim. Anyway, San Mateo County did a fantastic job. We were able to build on what they did. They gave us everything. They gave us a step stool to start off with, and we were able to take that higher. We weren't able to get where we want to go, which was the individuals, but we laid the foundation for the next DA. The next time PG&E does this, whether it's in Butte County or Shasta County or any of the counties on the West Slope, the next time they cause it, we've laid the foundation for that DA's office to go after the people and actually put people in prison. And ultimately, we hope that that will convince the people running PG&E finally to do the right thing, to take care of their equipment, to take care of their lines, to inspect them like they're supposed to, and not just as a requirement of the CPUC. So has justice been done? We've got all the justice we possibly could at this point. And we laid the foundation ultimately for hopefully justice to come.
Thank you, Mark. Anything else from you folks? It's not only been a long day, it's been a long 18 months, moving every day forward on this case. And as indicated, it's very, very personal to the office. I echo what Mark has indicated, that we see San Bruno, the district attorney's office down there, Steve Wagstaff, who is the elected DA of San Mateo County, gave us one of his investigators to assist on this. San Mateo DA did not prosecute it. It was the federal government, the U.S. Attorney Northern District, that did this. Now, as indicated in our, and I should, just as a final notation, talked about the office and all that the work that the Butte County District Attorney's Office did. But it should be noted that the number of people, the number of agencies that assisted us in this, we could not have done without. California, first of all, CAL FIRE is a partner right from the beginning. The California Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney down in Sacramento that assisted, and the FBI down in Sacramento that gave us the ability to send a number of these items collected by to be collected by the FBI forensic team and taken back to Quantico, Virginia, to their metallurgy lab back there. The San Ramon Police Department, and I'm already forgetting, the Butte County Sheriff's Office certainly did assist with this, as the Sacramento County Coroner, and even the Butte County Clerk assisting in helping us get the records on all of these people. And I've left someone out, I know.
Quick question. How many investigators did you have working on this case?
We had two that were generally full-time, in bits and pieces, at least a half a dozen other. We had two prosecutors, generally full-time, and with parts of other prosecutors working on that. Because I had to take senior people out, both Jennifer and Mark. Mark's a supervising deputy DA. I had to take them out of their rotation. We were already down some 4 deputy DAs from what we should be. So it was a tremendous sacrifice, and everyone else in the office stepped up to fill those voids to make sure that we could do this. But as I say, those people that I mentioned were invaluable in helping us. Sure, there must be other questions, but I'll let you cogitate on that for a moment. Let's see. Yeah. We will end at this point. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And are you out? Oh, let me do say this, because I should have said this. This campfire report is up on the Butte County District Attorney website. We've tried something a little different here. This report has, I think, well over 100 embedded exhibits within it, so that you can hit on the hyperlink and actually go to the evidence that form the basis of the grand jury's indictment. So I will see you probably tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.